Everybody, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour, and here's a story of me getting some comeuppance. After my ninth grade year of high school, I transferred to another high school, and just the way the schedules worked out, I ended up getting bumped up to having to take a rotation of classes with the upperclassmen, the juniors and seniors. So I felt pretty fancy about that. I get to hang out with the powerful people in the school, and I maybe let people know a little bit that that's where I was at. Didn't really socialize a lot with my peon sophomore classmates, and that went really well for me for the next 2 years until all of those upperclassmen had graduated, and now I discovered that there was perhaps a bit of resentment for how I had conducted myself in sort of selling out my own people in order to participate with the fancier people's deal. And they let me know that I had missed the boat on that, because when we did our senior year homecoming court vote with 9 people in my class, 8 of them making the homecoming court, you can guess which one had to take the pictures and hang out by the side and hold everybody's coats. Humbling moment, but I think I did a really, really good job of being the homecoming court jester my senior year. This can happen though, right? Like the social dynamic there, it makes a lot of sense to you because, well, if you are a part of a group and you have a chance to be a little bit fancy and hang out with the upper crust at the expense of your own group, that does cause friction, and maybe it should cause a little bit of friction. It certainly should have caused friction with where my head was at and how I did it at that time. Well, the passage we're looking at in Luke chapter 5 is exactly that kind of deal. You've got a guy who, ironically, is named Matthew, who had this proclivity for buddying up with the powerful occupying Roman class at the expense of his own people. That gets weird, and then he has an encounter with Jesus, and things get even weirder. So, take a minute, because this always makes more sense if you read it, and check out Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 through 31, and then we'll get after it. The passage opens saying, "After this, Jesus went out and saw a tax collector by the name of Levi sitting at his tax booth. 'Follow me,' Jesus said to him. And Levi got up, left everything, and followed him." Now, the key word in this thing that would have popped for the original audience is tax collector, or in Latin, publicanus, I think would be the singular. In the same way that would pop in their brain, think about what April 15th does in your brain if you're an American. Tax day. You just know what that means. You don't need anything more to it. And think about all of the connotations that conjures in your brain. Like maybe you're one of these people who just really loves taxes, and if so, go get them. Maybe you're a normal person who's like, that could always probably be a little bit less, and I don't totally enjoy writing this check. Hey, wherever you land on it, you're very aware that it happened. And no matter how frustrated you are with the system that we have now, it could be worse. And one of the ways that it was worse was, well, how they did it in Rome. So here's the deal. About 160 years before the time of Christ, this new tax system was brought into place. And there were a ton of reforms going on at this era in the Roman Republic. There were a lot of tensions because of veterans returning from war and property disputes as they came back after serving too many terms in a row. Rome had kind of overexpanded. You had a gang problem. And so a lot of things are changing in Rome all at once, and taxes are one of those things. And so there's a creation of this class of tax collectors who are drawn from the upper levels of society, whose job it is to effectively make a bid and to work out a bid with the government. Like, I will get you this much. And the government's like, cool, and that's the deal. And they contract on that. And then the tax collector's job is to go out into their district and come up somehow with that much money. Now, they had the backing of law, so it wasn't totally a shakedown because the people couldn't really say no. But at the same time, it was well known by the government and by the people and by the tax collector that the way they were going to get paid was by just taking more than people actually owed. So as you can imagine, corruption in this situation was going to be rampant, especially because these people at first were taken from the upper classes. So who are all their buddies, right? Well, other upper class people. So they're going to go to these other upper class people, and corruption is going to be super easy and super lucrative in this kind of situation. And so there have to be some more reforms here. And the new reforms say, okay, we're going to have to take the tax collector types from a little bit lower high-ranking classes, the patricians and the equestrians. And we're going to have to make a rule that says that the tax collectors can't hang out with their high-class buddies anymore because there's too much corruption. We're not getting the revenue that we ought to get. Well, this creates an I don't know, what do you call it? An ostracized class of tax collector. They can't hang out with their rich pals. They wouldn't want to hang out with poor people. And who would want to hang out with them anyway? Like if that guy comes around, I'm losing money and more money than I'm probably legally bound to give. So I don't like that guy. But you know what would make that guy even worse? Is if that guy were a representative of a foreign government, but he went to high school with me. We palled around. We played ball together as kids. My dad knows his dad, and the rest of us just suffer under the boot of this stupid oppressor. But that guy sold out and made a deal with the upperclassmen, sold out his classmates, and now he's running around getting rich at my expense. You can imagine why nobody would like this guy. And that is all the stuff that would have popped in the brains of the people who heard the word tax collector. Boo, hiss, we hate this guy automatically. I wonder what Jesus is going to do to straighten him out because these guys are obviously the worst. Follow me. What? Follow me, Jesus said to him. Well, why would you invite someone who's just absolutely the worst to follow you? Like what you should go up to that guy and say, Jesus, is pay everybody back who you were mean to. Well, Jesus might get around to that a little bit later. Let's give it a minute. But instead, the idea that this person who is the most ostracized of all the ostracized people, could possibly be included in what Jesus is doing, could possibly participate in the kingdom of God, is nuts. How is this even supposed to work? And Levi got up, left everything, and followed him. 2 words. This guy drops a business that theoretically you can never quit. I mean, this is one of those jobs like assassin or something where they're like, I've decided to get out, Lenny. You'll never get out of this job. And it's just, you can't quit. I'm sorry. You have to be this forever. I mean, it's like, what's the John Wayne line? It's from Shane. It's like a brand. You wear it forever and it's never going away, especially in a little town like Capernaum. Remember, that's where all of this is going down. Well, Jesus has had enormous success in this town. He healed that leper. He healed that paralytic. He calmed the storm. He's got a huge following there. And now he's moving beyond tackling the forces of nature, moving beyond tackling the questions of clean and unclean, the questions that the religious types would have been worried about with the leper. And he's gone all the way in to the level of the socially unacceptable. He is blowing up boundaries that seem absolutely unbreakable, untraversable. I'm making up words and I'm feeling good about it. And blowing through this in 2 simple words, he just obliterated the entire social structure of everything. Well, so what do you do if that happens? What do you do if you're the guy on the receiving end? You know where you sit in the whole pecking order of things. You know that you sold out your sophomore classmates in favor of hanging out with the upperclassmen and now nobody likes you. And you've just, in a couple of words, been delivered from that. And now you have a new purpose and a new thing and maybe you don't totally get it yet. Well, I'll tell you what Levi/Matthew decided to do was throw a gigantic party. So then Levi held a great banquet for Jesus at his house, and a large crowd of tax collectors and others were eating with them. Wow, who would you invite? You know, you think about all the social stuff that we just threw out for Matthew, for Levi, and you really do run into this weird question of, well, socially, who would even show up to hang out with this guy? Nobody? So he invited other awful people, other people who live on the margins. And so a large crowd of tax collectors and others. Do you see what Luke did there? There were also others at the party. Who do you think the others might have been, my friends? I'm going to give you a hint. I'm just going to whisper it into the microphone. Hookers. They were hookers. There's probably definitely hookers that the tax collectors hung out with and used the dirty money that they took from you to buy for weird sex stuff. So naturally, that's not going to go over well with people who want to keep things how they are, and they don't want these upstart tax collectors and others, hookers, to be having things going well for them. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law who belonged to their sect complained to his disciples, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" They didn't even have the stones to go and complain to Jesus himself. They're just going to gripe to the disciples about this stuff. And so, I don't know, we don't get any record that the disciples actually went over and were like, hey, Jesus, there were some complaints that came in the comment card box, and I didn't know if you wanted to address these now or possibly later. But somehow Jesus, for the second passage in a row, is completely aware of what these religious leaders are thinking. And honestly, how hard is it to be completely aware of it? The reason they're hanging out around Jesus is not to come and see if the Messiah has finally arrived, the reason they're hanging out is because this guy represents another threat. There have been a lot of messianic claims that have come and gone over the years, but Jesus is the first one that kind of smacks of real. He ticks all the boxes in terms of the story of what we call the Old Testament and prophecy and miraculous stuff, and people are following him, and it all kind of looks legit. But if it's legit, and this guy with his lame outfit and his dumb shoes and his homelessness and his lack of fanciness and education and training, if that's what it looks like, well, understandably, the religious leaders are like, well, where do we fit? What does that mean for us? This is going to be a huge problem. And so I think they view Jesus as a threat. Well, I think the text bears out that they view Jesus as a threat to their own position, their own money, their own authority. I think maybe some of them really believed the things that they taught, and they viewed him as a threat to that as well. And ultimately, we're going to see this relationship go from raising a few obnoxious questions. Excuse me, I'd like to talk with the manager. I'm concerned about who's at this party and what kind of message it sends. It's going to go from there all the way to, yeah, we just need to kill him. And ultimately, that's the scheme that they pull off. But we're not there yet. So Jesus knows exactly what they're thinking without being handed the comment card. And in verse 31, he answers them, "It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I didn't come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." Dang. Okay, it is fun to sit with the text and kind of game out the social dynamics and what are people thinking? What's the original audience thinking? What are the tax collectors thinking in the room? But it's another thing entirely to let the red letters, the ones that Jesus says, or at least that's how it is in my Bible, soak in and to think about the timelessness of what he just said. Jesus is God in the flesh, or at least that's who he holds himself out as being and who the text holds him out as being. So what he's saying is God's interest in redemption is not first and foremost in affirming those who are already pretty good at affirming themselves and who are already pretty sure that they're right about everything and therefore maybe only sort of need a God, more like a God partner than an actual God to save and deliver. No, Jesus is interested in the people who are screwed up and broken and have problems and are aware of their problems and who have nobody else to hang out with and who've been dealt a terrible hand or maybe dealt themselves a terrible hand. Either way, whether you went out and dug up the sick for yourself or you just got it through no fault of your own, sick is sick. And Jesus makes no distinction about how that sickness happened, just that he has tremendous compassion for that brokenness and that loss and that disappointment and that hurt and that sin and that failure. He's here to fix it. He's here to redeem that stuff. That echoes through the ages to you and me. And when we read a passage like this, it looks like we're given two options. We can take the road more traveled, which is, I'm awesome, I know how all the things are, and I am prepared to issue Twitter judgment from whatever my particular moral handbook might be, whether it's one that looks more rightist or more leftist or more otherist. I can see how all the other people are wrong and announce how all the people are wrong, and from my throne of rightness, I will dictate to everyone how they ought to be impotently through the power of my keyboard. Or we can choose this other path that seems to be less taken, which is, I got problems, don't I? Problems of my own making, problems that were dealt to me, problems that are nobody's fault, but I've got problems. And if there were a being who were in a place to do something about my problems, it would be to my benefit to listen closely to what that being is about, because any gesture or effort toward me, a person who is broken and flawed, from a being who is perfect and flawless, must be a gesture of grace and love, and that is worth paying attention to. So I do a ton of stuff on this channel, and I love doing all of it. Going around visiting other churches, the nuts and bolts of the Bible stuff, how to read the Bible better. Got all these different things cooking all the time, and that's fun for me, but I really like doing this. And I know that some people are more attracted to all the other stuff. I know it's a smaller crowd that wants to be here for this kind of thing, but I love that you are in on this deal. And this is what we've been doing from the beginning, right? So if you like this kind of conversation where we just go right through the text, I'd be really honored if you would consider checking out the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. It's not the same as this. It's an entirely all audio thing. It comes out 5 days a week, weekday morning before you get up for work or workout or whatever you do. And they're short. They're like 7 to 12 minutes every single time. Right now, I'm about 100 episodes into the Gospel of Matthew. And the thing that's great is we can go as slow as we want and break it down and chase all the rabbit trails and really dig deep into the thing and have fun and goof around with it and enjoy it. So anywhere you can get a podcast, there's a link down below as well. You can sign up for this thing. You don't even have to sign up. You can just download it as they come and run along with it. It's easy to catch up, or you can just jump in right where we're at. So again, it's called the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast, and thanks in advance for maybe checking it out. All right, we'll do more of this stuff and a bunch of other stuff soon. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour. We'll catch you in a bit.